Hey there YouTube, this is part 3 to my Enemy NPC tutorial. Let's quickly look at what we were left off with the last part. In the last part, we created an enemy NPC that will damage you when it gets close enough. It's static, it's really boring, so this part 3 will be all about animating the NPC so it looks more alive rather than a floating statue. Before we start with the animation, you might see that when we get closer and farther away from the dummy, it starts kind of jumping. It almost looks like it lags for a second. And there is an explanation for this and a fix, easy fix too. The explanation is that the network ownership of the NPC is switching from the server to the player as it gets closer. And when it switches, that's when that jump of latency happens and it looks like it's lagging. So to fix this, all we want to do is just set it so that it's permanently set to the server that calculates the physics for the enemy NPC. And it's all we have to do is go into our script that's in the humanoid that we worked in the last part. And right underneath the root variable, that is what we want to set the network ownership to. And to do that, we just index the root. And we're going to use a variable called set network owner. And usually you would send a player instance as a parameter to this function. It would make it so that part's network owner would be that player you pass it. However, we want it to be the server. But how do we pass the server? Well, actually, we just don't pass anything. We're going to pass nil, and it will automatically know that the server should be the network owner of this part, which is our root. And now if we go play the game, we shouldn't see any of that jittering anymore because the server won't be offloading the work anymore. Now it is on to the animations. So first let's set up the script so that we can be ready to add the animations. So in my humanoid, there's an animator object, and that is very important. You need that in there. Mine already came with it, but if yours doesn't have it, just go to the humanoid, right click, insert object, and we're going to search up animator. So it's not an animation, but we're looking for an animator. And we're just going to add it to the humanoid. And let's go back to our enemy controller script. So now we're going to want to create some variables for this animator. So first let's create, let's just call it animator. Local animator equals script.parent wait for child animator. Well, actually, since script.parent is equal to the humanoid, we can just use the humanoid variable here. Humanoid wait for child animator. So we have our animator within this variable. And now we're going to want to create the animations. And I'm just going to create them inside the script as the animations will have the script as its parent. So I'm going to insert an object into our enemy controller, and it's going to be an animation. And for this tutorial, for our enemy NPC, I just want this dude to walk, have a walk animation, a standing idle animation, and an attack animation. So you can create as many animations as you want, but for this tutorial, we're just going to be making 3. And so I'm going to duplicate the animation so that there's 3 in there. And I'm going to name them for what I want them to be. So like walking, the walking animation, what did I say? Idle animation and an attack animation. And so they're named as so. And I'm going to index them in the enemy controller script right underneath our variable for the animator. So first I'm going to create an idle animation variable. And it's going to be equal to script wait for parent or wait for child idle. I'm going to do this for each of the animations. So I'm just going to copy and paste and change the names of the variables and what they're indexing. So walking animation and attack animation. And I'm going to rename or search for the right animation. So this one will be the walking animation. and this one will be the attack animation. So now we have variables that index our animation objects. We'll now start creating the animations themselves. So to do that, we're going to work with our dummy here. And we're going to go into the avatar section at the top here. And we're going to click on Animation Editor. So when you open it up for the first time, mine opens up at the bottom. You can move it to wherever you want. I like it at the bottom. Or actually, I'm going to move it to the top. That makes more sense to me. Anyway, I have mine at the top, and it's going to first ask you to select a rig to animate. And our rig is the dummy, so you just click the dummy, and you'll name the animation. You don't have to, you can name it later, but just naming it now, you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to create the idle animation first, so I'll just call it that. You can call it whatever you want. And this isn't going to be a in-depth tutorial on how to animate. There's way better animation tutorials out there than what I could teach you guys. I am a coder. I am not a Roblox animator by heart. However, I can make simple animations, and if you just follow along with what I do, you can probably figure out how to make better animations, or at least know how to create one in general. So to start out, I am going to select the parts I want to move at first. So the first frame, this is the timeline cursor. I want to start at the beginning, and this is going to be an idle animation, so I want him to look alive and breathing. So maybe just have the arms out a little bit. However, I want it to be a little bit less. My rotate is at 15 degrees right now. I'm going to change that to like 10. That might be a good option. Yeah, there we go. So we just want him to look alive. This is going to be the first frame of the animation. Just have the legs separated from each other a little bit. Looks like he's standing now, which is perfect. And I'm going to move like 15 frames over, which is the middle here. And all I want to do is just move him a little bit, so then he looks like he's breathing. So the rotate is what's activated first, but I want to move a part, not rotate it. So if I press the R button, it will switch from rotating to moving. And my move is 0.25 studs, which is perfect, I think. So I'm going to move them down. 0.25, no, that's way too much. Way too much studs. How about 0.1 studs? There we go. So now he's moved down one. And I'm also going to go to the end of the animation and move him back up to where he was before. Now if we play the animation by going back to the start of the timeline and pressing the space button, yeah, you see he kind of breathes a little bit. And if you want to loop the animation, you need to press this toggle looping animation button here. So now when I press play, it won't stop and it will just loop, and we can see what it looks like. So yeah, he's definitely looks like he's breathing. Maybe breathing a little fast, if anything. So to extend the animation length, because right now it's only 1 second worth or 30 frames worth of animation, I'm going to set it to 2 seconds by changing this value here to 2. And I'm just going to move that, whoops, whoa. These little diamonds that appear are the keyframes, and it's kind of like the points of where you set the position of all the limbs and stuff. And it tweens between these keyframes. Roblox will automatically create the in-between frames of the animation. So to slow down the animation, I'm just going to take this keyframe and move it all the way to the end, and the middle keyframe of him breathing at his full out breath, exhale. And I'm going to set that to 1 second, which is halfway through this 2-second animation. And now he breathes half as quickly, and that looks about right. However, I want the arms to move a little bit. So I'm going to go to the middle of the animation and just press the R button to rotate, and just have the arm extend out a little bit more when he breathes in. And then when it gets to the end, I want the arms to go back to where they were before. And now, when he breathes, his arms extend out a little bit as well. And now he looks alive, and this is our idle animation. So that is one animation down, but first, before we start the next one, we want to export this to Roblox. So there's two important things that you need to make sure are set before you export the animation. One is if you want the animation to loop and not have to start it every time it finishes, you need to have the toggle looping animation on. If I were to turn this off and export it, if I play the animation in game, it would stop when it gets to the 2-second mark. However, the idle animation is going to be playing constantly looping when the enemy NPC is standing still. And I don't want to start it every time it stops. So toggling this looping animation in the editor will also make it when you play it in game, it will also loop. They kind of don't make that clear. So the second thing we need to make sure is set is the correct animation priority. If two animations were to play at the same time, which one would be shown over the other? And that's where animation priority comes in. And in this list, it starts with core, idle, movement, then action, action 2, action 3, and so on. And it goes from least priority, core, to most priority, action 4. So if a movement animation and an action animation were to play at the same time, the action animation would have more priority and would be the one shown on the player. So for this idle animation, there's a perfect priority selection for us, and it's called idle. So I'm going to set this one to idle, but our other animations we're creating today will be in other priorities. So this one is idle. I'm going to set that. And now it's time to export the animation. So we're going to publish to Roblox. Name it whatever you want, add any description you want as well, and you can just submit it. And now the animation will be saved onto your Roblox account. You can use the link to look at the animation online, but it will also be in your toolbox. So I'll be using the toolbox later, but we don't need to access our animation right now. So I'm just going to close that window. Now it's time to create the other animations. So I'm going to create a new animation by selecting create new, name it whatever you want. I'm going to call this walking, create, and now we have a fresh slate to start animating again. So I'm going to start animating the first frame, and I am going to be changing the rotation to like 25 degrees now. And a walking animation, I'm going to do a very simple one where the arms just kind of rotate like an R6 animation. So that we're working with an R15 rig right now, but that doesn't mean you have to do complex animations. So, yep, that's the first frame. I like that. I'm going to add a little R15 pizzazz to it and add some bending to the joints to make it look a little bit more realistic. There we go, first frame. And now second frame, I just want to rotate it the opposite direction. I can't remember how far it was. I bet it was just 2, so 1, 2. Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. What? It's weird. Huh. 2? No? Sometimes the rotate tool just acts really weird. There we go. Now let's look at that animation. Yep, it does the in-between. And now I just want the same frame from before. So a quick way, I don't have to re-bend the arms and legs to the same place they were before. I can just copy and paste the first frame. All you have to do is select the top diamond of the frame you want to copy, right click it, copy selected, and now go to the frame you want to paste it in, and then right click again and paste keyframes. So I'm going to move this middle keyframe to the middle of the animation. Let's see how that looks. We're going to loop this animation because it's a walking animation. And yeah, that's a walking animation, I guess. It's not the best. Remember that I am not the best animator in the world. I am far from being even decent, but this is just a little tutorial on how to get the animations into our game. So if you guys already have animations that you didn't need to create, you really don't have to be watching this part if you don't want to. But so now it's time to export the animation because this is as good as I'm going to make it. We need to make sure that the looping animation is on because we want this animation to loop while it's walking. And we also want to make sure the priority is set correctly, and we want it to be a higher priority than our last one, which was idle. So the next one, and it makes sense, is to do a movement priority. And now we're just going to publish to Roblox and submit it and close. And now we're going to make our last animation, create new, and this is going to be our attack animation. This is just going to be a punch. It's going to be really simple. Our first frame, the arm is just going to be up. I'm going to make the rotate 45 degrees to be able to do this straight arm like that. And maybe the first frame, yeah, first frame should be like this. And maybe add a little bit of a wind up a couple frames later. Rotate the arm a little bit. I mean, rotate the torso. You could even do a little bit of, ooh, yeah, exaggerate that wind up right there. And now we're going to move the keyframe a little bit farther, or the timeline, so then we can now start animating the actual punching part. Whoops, whoa. We just want his arm to extend out as far as possible. Boom. Maybe even a little bit of a forward torso exaggeration, and then rotate the arm as so. So now he looks like he's punching. And then just go back to the first frame by doing what we did before, by copying the selected frame of the first frame and then pasting it at the end. And let's look at that animation. Looks terrible, but it's a punch. The only thing I hate about this animation right now is that this arm doesn't move at all. It's like stuck to the torso. So let's move that out a little bit. And that looks a lot better for the arm, at least. Still terrible. Still terrible. The 45 degrees too is a little exaggerating, but you know what? It's fine. We're just going to call it good. You know, you can edit it as much as you want, but that's where I'm finishing here. I'm going to set the animation priority to action, and I am not going to set the looping animation toggle because this one does need to stop when it's done. It only needs to run when the enemy NPC attacks. So it will not loop when it finishes. And since we don't have it toggled and we made sure that the priority is set to action, we're going to publish this to Roblox real quick. Submit. And now we have all of our animations. We can now exit the, goodness, where is it? Oh yeah, it's in the avatar. It used to be in the plugin section, but now we can turn off the animation editor by selecting it again, and now it will make that tab disappear. And now we're going to start working in the script again, where I like working. So I'm happy again. Inside the enemy controller, we have our animation objects set to variables that we did before. Right now, the animation objects don't have any animation IDs within them. And that's what we want to do now, since we created our animations, or you can do this with already created animations. You just go get their ID. And to do this, we're going to go into our toolbox here, but you can do this on the website too. But for this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you guys how to do it from the toolbox. We need to open up the toolbox under the View tab. Press the toolbox button and select My Animations. And here we have our 3 animations we created. And we want the animation ID. So let's, for the idle animation, right click it, copy asset ID, And we're just going to go to our idle animation object and paste what we just copied into the ID section. And it will automatically create it into a Roblox asset ID. And we're going to do this the same thing for the other animations. The walking animation, copy. And in the walking animation object, paste. And for the attack, we're going to copy and paste. And now we don't need a toolbox anymore. The animation objects now all have their animation ID set. So now we can go into the script and start loading them into the animator. So to play an animation, you need to load it, and we load it through the animator. The animator has a function called load animation, and we just pass it the animation objects that we have as variables. And we're just going to do this for each animation, walking animation, and the attack animation. Load animation actually returns an object that we need, so we're going to create a variable called this one for the idle animation. We're going to call it idle track. So the load animation passes a track object, and these tracks are what we use. An animation track is what we use to actually play the animation on our humanoid or whatever we're playing the animation on, in this case our enemy NPC. So we're going to create these variables for all three of these lines and name them. Oh goodness, I didn't name this correctly, did I? This is supposed to be walking. That's kind of embarrassing. Didn't notice that before. Walking animation, I just renamed it. And attack track. So now, whoa, that's not how you spell attack either. So now we have these three tracks, and this is where we play the animation from. So these tracks, an animation track has a function called play, and that will play the animation on our humanoid or on our enemy NPC when it's ran. And this is perfect because our idle animation is actually going to be playing always. It will never not be playing. And since we looped it, when it finishes the animation, it'll just play again. So at first we just want to, in the script, just play it. This will run it, and since it loops, it won't stop. And this is a perfect time to run the code and make sure that the animation is actually being played. And you can see, since we added the play function call, it's actually playing that idle animation, and it is looping correctly. If your enemy NPC does not, if it only plays the animation once and then it goes back to being a statue stiff, that's because you didn't set the animation looping toggle when creating the animation. Anyways, let's look at what it looks like when it's running now. It stays on the idle animation. So now, yeah, still weird when it's moving, and when it's attacking, it still doesn't really show it visually. So now we're going to do the harder animations that have a little bit more logic to them. Let's work with the walking animation. So we want this walking animation to only run when the enemy NPC is actually moving. Well, luckily, let's hide this find nearest player function that we don't need anymore, or need to work with anymore. The code that actually makes the enemy move is within our heartbeat function. And this line here runs when walking, and this code runs when standing still. So all we need to do is make it run, or make it walk, when this if statement runs. So let's add the line walk track play. You might think that's all we need is to play it when it's walking, and to, let's add this line here, stop it when it's standing still. However, there is an issue to this code, and I'm going to run it and show you guys. When it starts walking, it's really only playing the first couple frames of the animation, and it starts over again. So it looks like it's just jittering from the first couple frames. And the reason is because this code runs every frame of the game. Every physics frame this code runs. And when you run the play function of a animation track, it will restart the animation back to its start. And since it's running every physics frame, it never gets too far before it restarts it back to the beginning. So to fix this, all we need to do is add a check to make sure it's not already running. We can add a new if statement. Yay, more if statements. So first we're going to index the walking track, and tracks have a wonderful property called isPlaying, which is only true when the animation is playing. So if we actually don't want this if statement to run when it's playing, we want it to run when it's not playing. So we're going to add this not to the beginning of the if statement. So if not walking track is playing, then we want to play it. And we're going to add the same type of concept when it stops too. So and we're going to remove the not from this if statement here. So if it is playing and we're standing still, then we want to stop it. And this just makes sure that we're not running these functions when we don't need to. And now let's test out the code here and press the play button. And now if everything's correct, it should have the walking animation working correctly. And yep, it is definitely walking now. And if we get farther enough away, it will go back to just doing the idle animation. But of course, since we haven't added any function calls to the attack animation, it doesn't attack. So that's the last thing we need to add. Let's go to the enemy controller script once more. And we have our attack track up here, and we just want to play it when the enemy NPC attacks. And this is the code that runs when the enemy NPC attacks. So let's just add the attack track play here. And we don't need any other logic within there. All we need to do is add the play call. And now when it attacks, it should do the attack animation. And it still walks when it's attacking. It's perfect. But you might be wondering, why is it doing it looks like it's head bobbing like it's at a rock concert. And that's just because of the settings we have for the enemy NPC. We have it so that it attacks every 4 times per second, which might be way faster than anyone would want. So if we go to our enemy controller script and look at its attributes that we created in previous tutorials, we can change the attack wait to 1 second. So it attacks only once per second. And we'll see that it looks much better when it's attacking less times per second, because it actually gets to the end of the animation. And now it looks like it's punching. And the best part about this is now the player has a visual representation of when they're getting damaged. Before it was kind of like you're just random, it just looked like you were magically getting damaged, but now you can actually see the attack happening on the enemy NPC. And guess what, guys? This is the end of this tutorial. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any more ideas for future parts of this tutorial, comment that below. The next part I have is intended for respawn logic. So if you kill the dummy, it will respawn. Any questions, just comment and I will try to get back to you guys. See you guys for the next part of the tutorial. See ya.